Hi there. Recently I came upon this particular article. the the source of the article is Washington Free Beacon, and this article says that David Brock, who is the either owner or editor or is on the board of directors, whichever, is basically planning, and he's massive lobbies for Democratic Party. So David Brock essentially has, before this whole Russia deal came about, had already prepared points to topple the President Donald Trump's presidency by laying out a very systematic plan. And he basically says, because they knew that their voter base is failing, that is Democratic Party's voter base, it says that Brock plans to defeat Trump through impeachment. So there is an article, and they have provided a link for the actual memo that was written. This article was published by Joe Schofstahl, and it was published on 21st January 2017. So before anyone was even talking about it, they already had a plan through impeachment. So that means the entire deal about Russia, all this, it's complete propaganda. It's so clear. And we'll go to the confidential memo, which is already uploaded on Script. So we'll go through that. So it's gonna be a rather long video. Here the assumption is that you already know who David Brock is, but the reason to make this video was to actually highlight the propaganda nature of the media and how they manipulate their audiences through pseudo-truths, okay, half-truths, semi-truths. So they'll say, oh, there is some kind of collusion, and they'll create this environment where something which is repeated again and again becomes a talking point for the entire media, and then people somehow start believing in it. And the reason was that of media having such an influence is because we don't really have any other sources of information. So by the way, just a warning, these videos are ad libitum. These are not something that I have prepared in advance. I'm only referring to articles, so the diction and maybe the narration may be a bit compromised. So mainly my idea to make this video is that the record gets preserved. So I have the video of everything, and I upload it, and people can watch it, and then they can reference the actual articles. It's not doesn't cover all the information. So if one is interested, one can always look into more details, do more research on the internet. So as you can see in the article, that the right will bolster Trump aggressively and deceptively, and that's something, if you are working for a particular party, in this case David Brock working for Democratic Party, they are obviously going to use a language which presumptively undermines his candidacy, okay, and that is what is called as politics, that everyone knows. But then propagandizing negative things in a way which is not borderline deceptive but outright pack of lies is where things get a bit worrisome. However, their plan did not succeed, but the point is they're pushing really hard, and they're appointing special counsel, and they're creating these fake ideas, some kind of connection between Russia and Trump, and it's not something that is even worth talking about. But when you listen to the White House press briefings, the kind of arrogance and stupidity, the dangerous cocktail of two that generally journalists display in asking questions, constantly hammering and belaboring over the same Russia canard is distressing, and it misguides a lot of people. So maybe some people actually like the policies of Donald Trump. Maybe some people actually like the policies of, let's say, Democratic Party. But instead of talking about policies, you invoke this emotional response instead of invoking a logical response, because if you think logically, then obviously you realize where your preferences lie. But this kind of narrative actually distorts your view about the candidate, and hence you get really confused about where your preferences lie, because people in the media constantly tell you that because there is some kind of attack on national, even if there is none, so they want to, in some kind of if they want to somehow present this as a fact by continuously and constantly repeating it, like playing a harp. It's just same notes over and over again. So people actually start believing that, okay, maybe there is something, because all news agencies cannot lie. But the problem is that there is an active collusion between the bureaucracy of the state, and generally when people refer to this term that has become quite popular, that is deep state. Well, deep state is not a conglomerate of actual individuals who constantly try to undermine democracies, but deep state essentially is the bureaucratic hegemony that exists in all nations. Okay, not just United States, but it exists in all nations. And that bureaucratic hegemony somehow tries to somehow overtake the democratic functions. So the legislative body and the representative body, that is either parliamentarians, or in case of United States, Senate, they don't really they can't overcome this bureaucratic boundaries or impositions imposed upon them, and that is what I would understand by deep state. So when we say that whatever is presented by the media is doing an honest job in that, I don't think that's even possible. There is always a connection between these deep layers of bureaucracy and the propaganda industry. And it's very important for us to understand, if we even least bit believe in the democratic principles, okay, or at least you think that democratic principles are, to say the least, are better than, let's say, some kind of a dictatorship, be it bureaucratic dictatorship or seemingly democratic dictatorship, right, which is not really democratic, but it gives an appearance of a democracy. And that is where media's collusion with the so-called deep state, or the hidden, underlying trenches of bureaucracy, that is where that collusion becomes very, very dangerous for people to really understand what is going on. So we'll continue with this. So it apparently they already had prepared a very extensive plan to either topple Mr. Trump if elected, or undermine the election in the first place. I mean, that would be the best thing. So going by the article, Brock's group claims to have more than 20,000 hours of video, 289 candidate research books, and the largest archive of Trump research in the Democratic Party. They did quite a bit of research. If they did so much of research and still they were not able to actually prove anything, prove that there was some kind of wrongdoing in the election of Donald Trump, that means either they have done a really bad job, or everything that they are saying is an absolute lie. and this is very important to understand. The state-of-the-art Trump war room will strive to uncover details of Trump's affection for Russia. Now, this is another thing, that actually during the election, Donald Trump may be out of naivete or just general, because the way he speaks like a everyday person, something that you would expect from any successful businessman, but definitely a businessman with integrity, well, as much as a businessman can have. But anyway, that's not important, but the point is, he harmlessly mentioned that I'll have really good relations with Russia, and I think they picked up on that and they created this plan. Alright, and that plan might have been created, extensively, that plan might have been created after the election of Donald Trump. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about it. So this plan is obviously created after the swearing in. That means, like I said, I'm going along with the information. Okay, so this plan is obviously being created after the president was sworn in. Okay, after swearing in ceremony. So this is a 44-page confidential memo. So it's talking about how the number of stories and the value of TV time for anti-Trump media coverage we generate will break all internal records. Now this is clearly propaganda sabotage. Okay, this is a sabotage. And if then in that case, if media says that we are bipartisan or we are unbiased, that becomes the biggest lie of all times. Okay, that is where it becomes problematic. If you say that you are a PR agency and then you prepare this plan and not say that we are a news agency, there is a huge difference. News is supposed to be unbiased. PR agencies are not supposed to be unbiased. Here, there is also one more important thing. Trump's approval rating will remain historically low. That means when they say it on news that his approval rating is falling, it's a plan to show that his approval rating is falling, so that people start thinking that he must be doing something wrong. Again, we human beings think, generally we think emotionally, and that is why people like these are highly successful in manipulating, and that's why dictatorships get established, because people like these PR agencies who wear the garb of news agency are very successful in manipulating the public. So here Super PAC will also conduct research in 16 to 20 of the most competitive Senate races in 2018 cycle using 2 research streams. Bridge will focus on defeating Trump either through impeachment. Well, that's really fucked up, because you're saying we can't defeat him democratically, so what we'll do is we'll create an environment for impeachment. Because how do you, I mean, if you don't have anything, any material, any incriminating material on the other person, then how do you say that we'll actually defeat him through impeachment? That means that you'll create such an ambiance where people will automatically start thinking that, yeah, he did commit some crime. And you can watch a lot of citizen journalist videos, independent journalist videos, and they go about these metropolitan areas, and people who are absolutely politically unaware, and I'm not, that's not something that I'm commenting about people. I'm generally saying that people generally are not very politically aware, because there are other things, especially when you're wealthy, well off, then the things that you care about the most, politics actually ranks pretty low on your priorities. Okay, so, and that is another way you can be very easily fooled by propaganda industry. So let's go to his actual memo, right? Let's go to the actual memo and let's see what's going on here. So I don't know if you can read it. I hope you can. Alright, so let's go through this one by one. Media matters for America. Private and confidential will not so much anymore, because I am reading it on script, so it's a published, open source published document. Somebody else published it, I'm just using it. Democracy matters. Strategic plan for action. They use these terms deliberately. Everybody understands that they don't really mean it, but so they have infiltrated almost all the media outlets. Progressive infrastructure groups we have built together started long before. Now I'm gonna go through this, and I'm as if you were reading it, so you can full screen your video and then you can read it. I'm just gonna go through it one by one. I'll also post the link in the description so you can read it, but we'll go through it, but we'll only talk about certain points. Okay, so this is fine. Politics, that's how it works. First line of defense and offense, as if they're actually talking about some kind of foreign enemy. We have the mandate. We won the popular vote. Well, there are controversies surrounding that, because there have been cases reported of almost, I don't know, 3.5 million, more than that, illegal votes. So however, that's not covered in the media because the media is already infiltrated. Second is unpopular vote winner are again the most admired man and woman in the nation. Well, that's something that you are just saying. You don't have any evidence for it, because everyone knows the kind of corruption that is rampant in the Clinton Foundation. So I made another video about that, and there are like hundreds of videos and C-SPAN hearings and so on, where Ms. Clinton is clearly implicated, and not just implicated, but there is proof on WikiLeaks about pay-for-play schemes and things like that. So not getting too much into that, because this video is about media propaganda and how a detailed plan can be actually laid out to defeat your political enemy, at the same time misinforming the public. And this is where it gets really bad. Okay, misinforming the public through supposedly unbiased media companies. That is where it goes wrong. If you, again, I have to stress this, if you are openly a PR firm that engages in publicity or propaganda for a particular party or a candidate, then you are openly saying you are not unbiased. Whereas the news outlets, which are supposed to be unbiased, they can't engage in disinformation campaigns. We are going to resist the normalization of Trump. His every conflict of interest and cronyism, blah blah blah, total towards authoritarianism. I mean, how does he know that? Have you provided any evidence? Not really. Just like you did not provide evidence for saying this is the most admired man and woman. Who? Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Give me a break. We are going to fight for the things in which we believe. We are going to fight blah blah blah. Contest every effort to limit rights, rescind protections, entrench inequality, redistribute wealth upwards, egalitarian. And this is something, this is a telltale sign of how they use seemingly innocuous terms to somehow foster their own agenda. This is another kind of disinformation. Trump camp spoke effectively to the grassroots and relied on online channels to disseminate information, as if there is something wrong with it. And misinformation and influence the media. Well, isn't a video on the internet, if it is laying out all the evidence, isn't that also a part of media? Isn't that also, if you can always say it's unbiased? Even getting fake stories onto cable TV, we already know that a lot of news channels were already publishing a lot of fake stories, and generally the stories that get least amount of coverage are the stories which are the most corrupt ones. The most corrupt cases rarely get any coverage, and that's why people don't, I mean, even till this date, people don't understand what the big deal about having a private email server is. They still don't understand, because it avoids oversight. That's the reason you have a private, because you can always communicate with people openly regarding pay for play, okay, which is not allowed. If you're a public official, you can't give preferences, so that's why. And the alt-right colonized Facebook. Now alt-right, this whole right and alt-right terms that will be used in this memo, they are just fabricated terms. What do you mean alt-right? There is no such definition. And they are colonized Facebook, which has established a virtual monopoly on information distribution. Yeah, because most people would prefer information which has more solid foundation, okay, something which is more accessible when they are trying to cross-verify the facts that you're presenting them with. One. So again, severe logical discrepancies in the entire memo. The language is presented in such a way which uses innocuous terms like democracy, which uses innocuous terms like distribution of wealth, and uses them to foster their own political agenda. Will adopt to the new reality and we will win. And this work to a point. Digital efforts, what digital efforts, would largely focus on changing the narrative with the traditional media versus voters. This statement is actually meaningless. Traditional media versus voters, the only meaning I can possibly extract from it is that you actually created disinformation and propaganda campaign narratives, and you countered the information with disinformation. This worked to a point, but wasn't enough in the face of news media incentivized by profit and access, and fearful of intimidation and bullying by the Trump forces. The only intimidation I have seen so far is media intimidating the Trump campaign. I don't think I have seen any other kind of intimidation. In the next 4 years, Media Matters will continue its core mission of disarming right-wing misinformation. I mean, you came up with this term, and now you're using it as a tool to somehow presumptively define first of all right-wing as some kind of as a camp which is clearly undesirable. And that is how you basically manipulate information. That is how you make people believe that, yeah, because obviously when you say right, they are obviously wrong. So, we are trying to counter their narrative. What's wrong with that? And serial misinformers, internet, and what misinformers? People, when they ask questions about a fact that was uncovered, okay, something like 9/11, why shouldn't we have open inquiry about that? Well, as soon as you say that, you're fake news automatically, by their definition. So asking questions apparently is the right-wing propaganda. Alright. There are quite a few keywords which are quite toxic. Alt-right social media fueled harassment campaigns that silence dissent and poison are, well, not really. I mean, if there is a silencing that is going on right now in the internet space of voices. Like recently a Google employee was fired because he questioned the hiring practices of Google. So he was simply labeled, and this is where it becomes very dangerous. He was simply labeled as right wing, as a male chauvinist, without ever asking what did he write exactly, without ever saying that let's cross verify and check what he's trying to say, because he can always read his article and he can always verify and whether and you can have a conversation about it. But labeling someone as a bigot is rather easy, because that serves your purpose really well, doesn't it? And again, here's that Trump will be defeated either through impeachment or at the ballot box. How are you so sure? This is almost reading Mein Kampf. Okay, this will happen, that will happen. I mean, who talks like that? You have to be absolutely delusional to state something like this. Crew will be leading a non-partisan ethics watchdog group in a period of crisis with president and administration that present possible conflicts of interest and ethical problems on an unprecedented scale. Crew will demand ethical conduct from the administration and all parts of government. I mean, who is this crew exactly? Now this is very important. Trump will be afflicted by a steady flow of damaging information, new revelations, and an inability to avoid conflicts. This is mind-boggling actually. Trump administration will be forced to defend illegal conduct in the court. Wow. Not like Hillary Clinton, where just FBI director is on your side because he was previously a part of HSBC group, so board of directors. Not like that, where he comes and says that, oh no, there was no criminal intent, we don't need to prosecute, or we don't even need to take this pay for play email, private email server controversy to court. We don't even need to do that, because I say so, because of course my reputation is beyond dispute. Dark money will be a political liability in these states. Yeah, well, we'll see about that. Share Blue will take back social media for Democrats. How do you do that? We will delegitimize Trump's presidency by emboldening the opposition and empowering a majority of who oppose him. Wow. So you, instead of empowering everyone, you only empower that majority. And by the way, it's not majority of Americans, it's that majority of Americans who oppose him. Oppose him based on what? Never say that. Share Blue will become the de facto news outlet. Yeah. Financial sustainability, diversifying content offerings. Good God. So now, this is the opening statement. Top watchdog against fake news and propaganda. Transforming the media landscape. You have transformed it, alright. Proliferation of weak generally. So everything, again, like I said, anything, any news or any person who basically asks questions is alt-right, and because you're alt-right, so it's like it's a circular argument. Alt-right is bad. If you question us, you're alt-right, so you're bad. Visibility in media matters will increase visibility in the ecosystem, and this is just pure rhetoric, and it has just a meaningless tirade of propaganda, nothing else. Well, they say that they are the watchdog. I mean, Who made you that? Who elected you the president of media all of a sudden? Now look at this. Conservative Media Research Center, with an annual operating budget of 18 million, works closely with establishment right-wing media to reinforce the myth of a liberally biased media, push journalism to the right, and propel misinformation on mainstream. Wow. So you just totaled the total amount of money that is being spent, and of course statistics may present this number to be higher or lower, but you just added them up and say they have annual operating budget of 18 million. Media Research Center. I mean, how do you know that the independent organizations are not actually a part of Media Research Center? Breitbart, which has received millions in funding from extremist billionaires close to the Trump administration. The newest branding for American white nationalism, anti-Semitism and misogyny, which is, I mean, just take their word for it, because, well, no evidence provided, because some words are uttered, so obviously it becomes misogynistic. Meanwhile, the right has spent millions, and where is, like, just search for how much was spent on the Democratic election campaign. There is almost a $350 million difference. So do you really think that having 18 million in between actually put even a dent on the Democratic Party's election campaign or propaganda campaign? No, not really. There was almost a $350 million gap between the Democratic and Trump election campaigns. He uses his Twitter account to manipulate news cycles. No, he uses his Twitter account. That's all. They share stories with him. You can always cross-verify, and that is where, and if, see, this is where it becomes very, very difficult for them to actually maintain this narrative, because you can always cross-verify any story on the internet today, almost any story. Okay, sooner or later it's gonna come out. If you can't cross-verify today, you can always cross-verify maybe a couple of days later, but you can do that. So it is really convenient to label someone, some news outlet, as alt-right or right-wing, because they already defined it for you and it's bad. So once you do that, then you don't really have to tell people to look for the evidence for the narrative that they are presenting, because they are obviously not right, alt-right or right-wing, and hence they are not bad. See the logical dissonance here? You know, it's a completely inverted logic. Trump TV, the streaming news, right side broadcasting, well, what's the problem? You have your own news. Why are you undermining somebody else's? This is something that I don't understand. That when you say that I'm going to undermine their narrative instead of making my narrative stronger. It's like when cab drivers say, no, we don't like Uber because, or we don't like taxi aggregators. Well, I shouldn't really defend Uber because they have sort of created a monopoly. So I don't think Uber has a leg to stand on in this debate. But it's like saying, instead of improving our services, let's try to undermine the competitors. Pretty old strategy, but immoral nevertheless. Media Matters is ready to stop them. Right. Overarching strategy, and it just this tirade. It's just senseless, moronic talking points. Just go on and on, because Media Matters also needs money. Who's gonna get most money? Well, the head of Media Matters, obviously. So they have to come up with some kind of parallel reality. Media Matters must respond to three distinct challenges: decay of journalism, rise of fake news, information ecosystem that furthers extremism and cultivates. When has this happened exactly? Which outlets are you talking about? At least give me one fucking example, you moron. You have no examples, you have no evidence, you just ripping off as if it's nobody's business. It's just yap in your mouth. You're taking a term and running with it as if people will actually believe it. Serial misinformers and constantly the same thing over and over and over and over again. Toxic alt-right media, fake news, fake propaganda sites, at the same time being the biggest serial misinformation propagandists themselves. Okay, will no longer, and this is again this look at this point, the sandwich point between the three. The internet and social media platforms like Google and Facebook will no longer uncritically and without consequence host and enrich fake news sites and propagandists. Well, how convenient. So they planned it all along, where this goat-like creature, the CEO of Google, comes and says that the primary objective of Google will be to fight fake news. Yeah, you gonna decide which one is fake news and which one is not. Let the audience decide. Why not? Well, the reason is you're afraid that this deep entrenched bureaucratic deep state will actually be exposed. So yes, what they'll do is they'll collude with Google and Facebook illegally. Yeah, just like Facebook giving out names to Pakistani authorities on blasphemy laws. Well, you criticize a particular religion, you get blasphemy laws, you simply get a death sentence. Wow. So you're gonna what you're gonna do is you basically illegally gonna collude with the platforms that people are absolutely reliant on, like Google and Facebook and Twitter and all these social media platforms, and then you're gonna make them do things that favor you and especially disfavor others. Yeah, it topples their authenticity in a way. Even though people can always cross check, but they'll start questioning. They'll start questioning whether this is the right thing to do or not, and this is where people fall victim to the propaganda industry, which is again in the garb of unbiased media, the fourth pillar of democracy. Now this is something very interesting. Stopped Donald Trump's phone interview privileges. Okay, so that is how you're gonna counter fake news and disinformation, by creating fake news and disinformation. It was supposed to call out national cable TV broadcast broadcast networks for allowing Trump to phone in to their show. So he can't even call them. He can't call them because if he calls them, he'll essentially be lying. Wow. I mean, I don't know how they come up with this crap, but they really seem to believe it, apparently. So he conducted 69 phone interviews in first 69 days of 2016 alone, and he could avoid being confronted by images and interviewers showing his lies for what they are. How do you, I mean, what? By looking at somebody's face, you can determine whether he's lying or not. I mean, how stupid do you think people are? Just by looking at his face? No, you're trying to restrict the access. That's what you're trying to do. Why don't you tell like it is? Because if a third person reads that, they say, yeah, so it's very important to actually, there are almost half the interviews that are there on television are conducted on phone. So does that mean all of them are lying? As if the information cannot be verified, as if you actually need to look at the face. That means every time everyone speaks, you have to, like, you can't, if your mother calls you on the phone, you can't trust her. Maybe she's lying, because you're not seeing her face. What kind of baloney is this? So they restricted And they did that. That's what they're saying. As a result of our campaign urging major networks to correct course, CBS News and NBC, well, not very surprising, publicly stated that they'll discontinue Trump's phone privileges. Wow. Because you are the one that grants privileges. They can revoke it. That's brilliant. Will push back on conservatism. Same thing again and again. The same crap. It's just puke, just smeared all over the floor. It's just that. It's like puke here and puke there. It's the same fucking puke. Doesn't matter. Leverage our authority to encourage good journalism? Really? What authority do you have except having massive amounts of money to spend on disinformation campaigns? Oh, you mean that authority? Yes, you would do that. You would leverage your authority. Develop technologies to serve as an early warning for fake news. That means AI and targeting specific keywords and shutting them down, which means end of freedom of speech, which means not good journalism. Okay, not good journalism, but good for them journalism. Huge difference. Implement a robust omni-channel communication strategy. How? By mobilizing a massive grassroots advocacy effort. You know what works? Good policies work. Propaganda never works. And if it did work, it results into some kind of a dictatorship when people are always dissatisfied, they're angry, and the direction that any nation would take is very, very dangerous. There is massive unemployment, just people feeling extremely insecure about the future. All these things happen, and then next, the rights of the citizenry will be taken away by a pseudo-democratic, dictator-like government. Traditional news outlets are dying. You know why? Because people have somehow seen through it. People have somehow understood that they are presenting that same old pukish narrative, which if one were to actually cross-check turns out to be absolute lie. That's why they're failing. They're not dying because there is some outside cosmological force which is acting on these traditional news outlets. So what they're saying is journalists face an increasingly precarious personal financial position. Now, what instead you can do is, if Media Matters can lend a helping hand to the traditional media, which is dying, in return they'll have to push the narrative of Media Matters, ergo Democratic Party, ergo Clinton Foundation, and all the rest of the cronies, including Bernie Sanders. I don't know why everyone still likes that guy. I mean, he's just an outdated human being, I would say. And his policies are, I mean, I have gone through his policies. I'm not getting too much into it today, but not very impressive. I mean, it sounds nice, the redistribution of income and all that. It sounds nice, but unless you have a really robust plan to go through with it, and you actually have to show that plan to people. Also, don't say that, yeah, I have a plan. I have a plan. Don't say that. Just show that plan. And by the way, he's pretty rich also, so I don't know what the problem with Trump being rich is. So what they'll do is they'll face an increasingly precarious. So they will not face, if they can, Media Matters can lend a helping hand. So you push our narrative, and we'll keep the old media from dying out. So having said that, moving on to other things, journalists who confront the extreme reality of Trump administration experience personal harassment. Well, I think almost all the journalists, the only thing that they're doing, they're harassing Trump. And we can see that from the White House press briefings. CNN and CNBC people are sitting in the front rows. Independent media and, according to them, the so-called right-wing journalists, they don't even get any space. I think there was one journalist by the name of Mike Cernovich who went there. Another, I think somebody from Infowars, Jerome Corsi, who got media passes in the press briefing room, and everyone made fun of that. So first of all, the space that he's talking about, the undue space that the right wing is enjoying, the so-called right wing, I don't, like I said, that's a complete misnomer, but anyway, they are running with it. First of all, they don't even have any space. So first of all, who confront the extreme reality, they're all over all the news outlets. Alright, so must grapple with effects of decaying journalism and blah blah blah. Well, according to you, journalism means all the positive stories about us and all the negative stories about our opponents. Well, that's not how it works, boy. Research, even our fiercest detractors acknowledge the veracity. No, they don't acknowledge the veracity of our research. I mean, this is like tooting your own horn and even in your own paper. It's like if somebody was to write a paper, he says, academicians throughout the world already acknowledge the veracity of my hypothesis. Right. So no, not really. They don't. Even I don't acknowledge anything that you have. The trash that you have just laid out like a heap. It really is sickening. And one by one we can go through this whole thing. And as you go along the document, you actually you can sense the doublespeak here. On one hand, they are saying they are going to gain space, and on the other hand, they are saying that alt-right, their term, has the majority of space. So I don't understand. They're saying, okay, we are going to build your brand, build our brand, and how are you gonna build your brand? Well, propagandizing about these kind of things, right? Issue terms are focused on correcting misinformation on gun violence and public safety, LGBT equality, reproductive health and gender equality, climate and energy, and economic policy. That you're saying correcting misinformation, don't you mean that putting misinformation out? Because when they constantly talk about gun violence, I don't really understand. I mean, how difficult is it for a criminal to get a gun, even if you ban guns? So every time governments are trying, because let me just lay out the difference between a person who has a job and doesn't want to rob people. He really has something to look forward to. Whereas a criminal who wants to rob people, well, as long as you're committing one crime, you might as well commit 10. So getting an illegal gun is not very difficult for a criminal. On the other hand, if you take guns away from the citizenry who wants to defend itself, well, then you'd be just making the job of the robber really easy, don't you think? And how many LGBT people have you really met in your life? Gender equality, well, I've got news for you, buddy. There is no gender equality, okay? There is simply inequality. And climate and energy, holy shit, that is another fabrication that you have come up with. So they come up with these fabrications over a period of time, they normalize it, it becomes a talking point. it becomes as if it's a real thing, and then they can run with it. Then they can say, okay, we are for defending these rights, LGBT rights. What about homelessness? Okay, what about actual economic policy? I didn't hear one thing about any policy. I haven't heard anything about how are you going to actually increase the job numbers. Nothing. All of that is just how we are going to actually push disinformation campaign against our opponents. Protective press pool and media credentialing, defending standard practices, so that they want to monopolize everything in their favor, but as soon as that monopoly is broken, they seem pretty disturbed with it. Applied for when Breitbart applied for permanent Senate gallery press credentials, Media Matters was quick to act by advising the credentialing committee. Okay, so who appointed you the advisor of credentialing committee exactly? Nobody, right? But you did that because you have influence. So earlier you were bitching about not having an influence, and now you're saying, oh, we have so much influence that we can just advise credentialing committee and they'll listen to us. Nice. Look at this crappy headline. Over the years, Media Matters has won or assisted in a number of tangible victories, from getting Glenn Beck off cable news to holding 60 Minutes accountable for its faulty Benghazi reporting. Yeah. Wasn't that Benghazi case that was related to the private email server, and she just following through with a random private individual called Sidney Blumenthal and rarely having any kind of communication, Hillary Clinton I mean, rarely having any communication with actual officials. So by faulty reporting you mean actual reporting where they made it up. They made the Arab Spring up, and especially the Libyan uprising up. They just said that it was some controversial video where people got all riled up and just attacked the embassy, whereas the ambassador was saying time and again that there is a real security risk. So if they reported that, that is according to you because it goes against your narrative. So you attack those people who present news that is harmful to you. Just say it like it is. Look at this. And I'm already getting tired, but I think you can read this. Neutralize government disinformation. That's true. You should. Is no longer the most dangerous source of information is the federal government itself? Well, you just won my heart, Mr. Brock. Of course, it is true that you really need to dismantle those lies given by the establishment. But according to you, of course, a lot of people disagreed with the Iraq war, by the way, including Donald Trump. He said something very specific. He said we shouldn't have gone in, and if we have gone, because the decision wasn't up to him. So if we are there, we shouldn't have pulled out the way we did. After that, it's the same crappy. And several of his top officials have prompted fake news stories, including the person that he has put in charge of the official White House social media accounts, who has used social to harass detractors. Great. Everyone knows who is harassing who. It's almost a harassment to watch mainstream media now. Forget about harassing Donald Trump. It's like watching CNN is an harassment in itself. Innovate against fake news and propaganda. That means innovate against news and create fake news and propaganda. Haven't you? You should have got your bullet points correct, I think. Facebook's virtual monopoly on information distribution has super changed fragmented. So what we need to do is get Facebook on our side. Almost 2/3 of American blah blah blah, everyone knows that. Fake news was also profitable during the 2016 election, that teenagers in Macedonia began publishing pro-Trump propaganda for the sole purpose of making money. Dude, the video that I am making right now can be called as pro-Trump propaganda. Okay, Wow. So if anything that you say against a particular party, that becomes pro. I mean, this is the result of binary thinking. This is the result of thinking either or. So either you are for a particular party or you're against it. You can't just open-mindedly critique something. That is something you can't do, because these people are so stupid, and I think they really are inane. Their arguments are absolutely just prepubescent in their strength. Nobody is making any money. We are already experts in monitoring the way. Yeah, you are, because you have hired agencies which can actually surveil people. That's how we'll do it. Big data analysis and early warning system. Well, yeah, there are movies made about it where you're basically raising an alarm about somebody potentially committing a crime, and well, you put a narrative. I forget the name of the movie. I think it was Minority Report, right? So yeah, that's how it works. Minority Report style. So they already are analyzing big data because they have enough money to do that, and they already have Facebook on their side apparently. Here is the scrap about Benghazi. Well, what you need to do is, again, like I say, cross check. You can watch Benghazi hearings, or Benghazi Oversight Committee hearings on C-SPAN 2, and you can make up your own mind and how these people, including former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, has been avoiding questions, and she just says that, she's invoking Fifth Amendment, that is, basically she won't answer. That's well within her right to not just deny answering any question. Great. So, predictive technology. This is where it gets more and more interesting. Alright. Cloud computing and machine learning, again, artificial intelligence. So you're basically gonna use bots to actually counter the narrative that may put you in your rightful place, that is, expose you as a liar. This is really disturbing. And here it comes, collaborating with social media platforms. Yes sir, you didn't say that before. Why didn't you just say colluding? It's not collaborating, it's colluding. So collaborating with social media platforms, because this is getting too long, so what we'll do is we'll continue this in the next part, in the second part. So I'll stop this recording right here, and I'll continue it in the next part, part 2, analyzing this document. Thank you.